And this would probably be your first day of Max, first week in Max, so if you're any farther than that, you probably already know all this stuff. But we're going to cover how to save files, how to merge files, how to set some coordinates, and how to clone some objects. The first thing we want to do is quickly go over how to save some objects. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few boxes here just to make a simple scene. So I've got myself a scene, and I'm going to explore a couple things about these boxes first that we didn't cover in the last video. The first thing you want to do is figure out where you can name them. And if I click on a box, remember, left-clicking in a, or right-clicking in a viewport will let the box stay selected. Left-clicking will unselect it, and you'll have to select it again. Or you can just click on the box and the viewport will be selected. But if I click on a box, go under Modify, I can name this box. So this can be pink box. And if you hit Enter afterwards, it will take effect, and this will be green box. And hit Enter. And now when I select them, you'll see that they have different names. I can also change the colors of these boxes by clicking on this little color swatch. So I'll leave them green and pink, but I'll change the colors. Okay, to save the scene, we need to go to File, Save As. And there's a reason we use Save As, not Save. So I'm going to say Save As, and I'm going to save this scene somewhere. I'm going to save it on my C drive. Okay, I'm going to call this Boxes and say Save. And now I can go to File, Reset, which will actually just kind of erase everything. Just puts everything back to where we started. And I can go File, Open, go to that folder, and here's my boxes. And you'll see that I've opened this this scene, and it hasn't changed since the last time I saved it. Now if I add another box to this, so we'll just add another box back there, and then I go to save it again, I can say Save As, and you'll see that it's labeled as the old scene. Don't say Save, because that will write over this scene. What you want to do is hit this little plus. So I hit that, and now watch what happens. If I go back to that thing, I now have boxes 02. Okay? So you always want to have those 01, 02, 03, 04, and then you can go back and delete the older ones when you don't need them. But that way, if something happens to your scene, you always have the last scene you went back to. So you don't want to use quick save or just say save. That's going to cost you something in the long run, and I'm not going to be able to undo it if you save over your old scenes. You always want to save a new scene, hit the little plus button. So that's how you save. Now, for naming these things, I'm going to go back to Save As. What we really should do is name these your last name, underscore, and then something descriptive, 01. And what that allows that to do is when you dump these in my inbox or my folder, your scene won't be called the same as somebody else unless somebody else has the same last name. And you'll never have your stuff overwritten by somebody else. And then I could just say save. Okay? So that's how we save something. The next thing that we want to do is merge something into our scene. I'm going to add a sphere into this, and I'm going to name the sphere green sphere. And this box over here needed a name too, and we'll call him dark green box. Okay? So I have 4 objects in here: pink box, green sphere, and dark green box. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to call it merge because that's actually what we're going to do with it. And I'm going to reset this, just like it's the computer when you turn it on. Now we can merge objects from that scene we just saved. So if I go back to that scene and I say go to this scene and open, if I hit merge, so file, merge, this screen will come up and I can select which components of the scene I'd like to keep. So let's say I just want the green sphere. When I open it, just the green sphere is open. If I want to merge again, if I want to just get two of the boxes, so the dark green box and the pink box, I highlight them and say OK, and now just those two pieces have been merged. This is the way you want to work. You want to make parts. So for your tank scene, if that's what we're doing this term, you do the turret, the gun, the treads, the body. Probably do them all as separate pieces because they're a lot easier to maneuver around with, and then merge them into one main scene. There's a couple advantages. The first thing is you'll always have the components. So if something happens in the main scene, you can always put the components back together. The second thing is if anything goes wrong with the components or something becomes corrupted, we have them all separated out into different scenes. Now you don't have to go crazy with that. You don't have to get all the components of the gun in separate pieces and then merge them. You can do large pieces and just keep them in separate scenes and merge them later. Okay, so that's merging. The next thing we want to do is play around with some coordinates. I'm going to make a little teapot here, and I'm going to make its sides a little bit smoother. I'm also going to make it so this little inside part is see-through. I'm going to select a shader and make it two-sided. You don't need to do this, but that fills in that backspace. And if you don't know how to do that, we cover that a lot later on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with the components on this. So I'm going to go to Move. And down here, you'll see these are our coordinates. And they're divided up into three axes, X, Y, and Z. And down here, you'll see that we have a little guide. Y is going this way. X is going forward, if you count this as the front of the teapot. And Z is going up. That Z-axis is usually the upward-facing one in Max, and that's why you have names to things like Z-buffer, Z-brush, normal Z mapping. That means that something is going along the up axis whenever you hear Z. Okay, down here before we've been moving these just by moving this through space. So I grab these arrows and move them. But you'll see as I move them that one of these numbers down here will move. That's because these are the axes. I can position something by moving these sliders and holding down the left mouse button and pushing up or down with the mouse. Now if I want to zero out these coordinates, I just type in 0. And what that does is now my teapot is directly on the 0, 0, 0, meaning 0, 0, 0 in each axis, coordinate, and it is perfectly centered to its own axis, which means wherever its axis is, it's centered to that. Its axis happens to be on the bottom. If this was a sphere, the sphere would have its axis in the center of the sphere. So we've zeroed these out. If I want this to go 10 units on the y-axis, I just type in 10. If I want it to go 100 units on the y-axis, I type in 100 and hit enter. Now this is important because we might need this centered, usually is why we would use it, and if you just do it visually, it won't be completely centered. Usually that's the only reason we use the coordinates in the first class, is to center something. It doesn't have to be centered, but you'll find that things will work a lot better if you keep them centered. That's our coordinate system. That's the basis of it. We come back to this later and we add a lot more to what we just learned there. Also, another thing to keep in mind is the space bar in Max actually will lock an object, and that's this button here. So if you see this button highlighted like that, nothing will move. It'll keep kind of going back to where it was, and that's not what you want. So you can unlock things by hitting that button. And if that doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it. But if Max isn't acting right at home for you and it seems like something isn't working, check this little button down here and make sure it's not highlighted because it might be locked. The space bar is a common key to hit by accident. It actually will lock things. Okay. Moving on, what we're going to do is make some clone objects. I'm going to use this little teapot here again. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key. So I right-clicked in this viewport to keep the teapot selected. I'm holding down the Shift key and moving the teapot. And you'll see one teapot is left behind, and now it makes two teapots. I still have my mouse finger holding down the left mouse button, and I'm still holding down the Shift key as I do this. Now I'm going to let go of the Shift key and the left mouse button, and this menu will come up. This asks me what I want to do. A copy means that it just makes a copy of this object. An instance means that it's making an instance of this object so that everything that happens to this object will happen to this object, or vice versa. A reference means that anything I change on this object will happen to this object. Okay? And again, if that doesn't make sense to you, just use copy for the time being. We only use copy for the first couple classes, and then you can play around with instance and reference, and by the time we start getting materials on here, you'll get the idea. Now the real power of this is in the number of copies. If I type in 5, and say OK, you'll see that now I have 5 teapots. Now remember, this front view, if I rotate it around, there's all 5 of my teapots. So I've created a user view in this, and I can go back and hit F if I want to go back to the front view. All right? So now I have 5 teapots. Now I could select all these teapots, hit the Move tool, hold down the Shift key, hold down the left mouse button and move them again. And unclick everything that you're holding down and say 5 more. Hit OK. And now we're going to have a little army of teapots. And you can kind of get the idea of how you can play with this. You can only make so many copies before the computer will crash. But I'm going to drag these teapots down and unclick everything. And we can call this 3 and say OK, and it's going to make even more teapots. And my computer's a little slow, but there's our teapots. So you can make copies of things very quickly. I'm going to reset this and go back to my standard box here. I'm going to make a very skinny box and make it poke up in the air like that. And you can see that I could, by doing that same process I just did, so holding down Shift and holding down the left mouse button, I can make something like a fence, and or planks, or whatever you want. But that's how we can make clones of an object. Okay? I could grab these. You can actually use rotate the same way. Holding down Shift, left mouse button, hold it down, rotate it. In this case, I just want one copy. And now we just move it into position, and we can make a fence that way. All right? So those are clones. And I think that's going to wrap it up here for this second part of Max Basic 101 tutoring. And we'll have another tutorial for you for the next part here in a little bit.